Let me tell you a story. There is a beautiful story in the Mahabharata. It's the story of Dharma Viata. Vyadha, as many of you know, Vyadha is derived from Vadha, which means killing. Vyadha is one who kills. It's a butcher. That is his profession, and this is his story. The Pandavas are in the forest at this stage. Yudhisthira, the eldest of them, is very unhappy about what he's done. He's played the game of dice. He's staked his wife. He's humiliated. He's come into the forest. All of you know the story. And then in the forest, what he does, every opportunity he gets, he talks to self-realized people and rishis. He says, "Sir, tell me, where did I go wrong? What can I do? How can I prevent the upcoming debacle, the doomsday from happening?" And along these lines, one day, a great rishi comes along. His name is Markandeya. Markandeya is already very famous. When he was born, when Markandeya was born, Shiva comes to his parents in a dream and he says, "Well, you're my devotees. You have two choices. You can have a son that lives a long time, but he's going to be a horrible person. Or you can have a son that only lives for 16 years but will be self-realized. What is your choice?" Now, Markandeya's parents have wanted a baby for ages. But then they say, they make the right choice. They say, "Lord, we'd rather have a son that lives even for a short time but brings light into the world." And so Markandeya was born. And then his is a different story. That's not what I'm about to tell you. But in the end, when he's about to turn 16, he goes and hugs the linga of Shiva and says, "I'm holding you. Death cannot come." And the god of death, Yama, comes. He rides on a black bull, and then Yama Pasha, the lasso of death, he puts it on Markandeya and tries to drag him away. But he's bound to the Shiva linga, and then so eventually Shiva comes and says, "How dare you drag me away? Do you think you can kill me?" And then and Yama realizes his folly, and then Markandeya becomes immortal. It is said that he still lives among us. So such is the man that comes to Yudhisthira. And Yudhisthira says, "Okay, if there is anybody that knows the secret of karma, it is Markandeya." So he asks him, "Lord, please tell me what the right duty is. How do I know what choice to make? Sometimes I have to do things that I don't want to do. I find myself faced with that choice. Sometimes something feels like it's the right thing to do, yet it's the most horrible thing that I can do. From where can I find the wisdom of doing the right thing?" So Markandeya says, "Yudhisthira, just by asking this question, you have shown how wise you are. Let me tell you a story that's going to help you understand the secret of karma." So he begins, the great Rishi Markandeya, telling the story to the eldest Pandava Yudhisthira, the story of Dharma Viata, the divine butcher. Long time ago, Markandeya says, in the Treta Yuga, even perhaps before the time of Rama, there lived in a village a Brahmin family. And they had a son. His name was Kausika. Now, Kausika was an unusual child from the first day. He was not interested in the usual toys and playthings that other children are interested in. He always used to go and sit in front of God and pray, and so on. The fact that he wanted something else in life was apparent from the youngest age. And Kausika grows up to be a young man, and like all parents, what do they want to do? They want to get him married. So his parents tell him, "Kausika, you need to get married. There are 3 debts in this world that one has to try their best to repay. Those debts are the debt to the parents, the debt to the guru, and the debt to the devas. The debt to the parent, the devas are repaid by doing havans like we did this morning, by doing yagyas. The debt to the guru is repaid by serving them and by diligently doing the practice that they give us. But the debt to the parents, my son, is repaid by having a family of your own. Kausika looks at them and says, no, that is not for me. I have been guided ever since birth to do something else. It is not my duty. His friends tell him, no, think about this. You're the only son. Your parents will get old. Already they are becoming feeble. How can you go away to the forest and meditate? Please stay here. Take care of them. Repay your debts. Kausika says, no, God has called me. And he goes off into the forest. He begins to meditate under a big tree, a peepal tree. As you know, in India, it's very revered. That in front of every major temple, there is a peepal tree. He sits underneath and begins to practice tapasya, great austerities, yogic practices, pranayama, meditation. He begins to study the Vedas and the Upanishads incessantly, chants the name of God. And he does this for years and years and years. He has no home, no food. The only food is every evening he goes into the village, the neighboring village. And then he goes and in front of householders, he says, Bhavati Bhikshandehi, please give me something to eat. And if they give him something, he eats. If they don't, he doesn't. Such is the life of Kausika, the renunciant, the sadhu, the sannyasi. After a few years, he begins to sense a great vitality, a great power within him. It was unfathomable. He feels that the limitations of body are as if nothing. He can go on for days without food or sleep. He has the energy to walk for hundreds and hundreds of kilometers. Sun doesn't burn him. Water doesn't drown him. He is unaffected by heat or cold. He feels a sense of expansion that is extraordinary. He feels inner powers beginning to come from within him. The more he meditates, the more he finds this. Yet, something is missing. There is no joy. That it's as if he's achieved a lot of things, but yet every day is the same. It's a, don't we have that? It's as if, we work all our lives and we become huge successes. We look back and say, wow, that's where I was and here is where I am now. But yet, darn, everything is still the same. That's the feeling he gets. Despite all of his powers. It's well known in the village now that there, in the forest there is a sannyasi named Kausika who has all of these powers. But yet he's unhappy. And one day, he says, this is enough. He says, Lord, you have to show me the way out. I don't know what else to do. So he comes back to his tree and sits down and begins to meditate. And he says, I am not going to give up until I find an answer, until I find your joy within me. And about 2 minutes into his meditation, it's evening time. What happens in the evening time under a peepal tree? Perhaps you don't know. I had to look it up too. I wasn't sure. What happens is birds begin to come back. Would they not? That's what they do. Crows and cranes and other birds like that. Now, all of you, even in Delhi, you must have heard of the noise that crows make. They're not silent birds, and they don't make a noise that is very melodious, make a harsh noise. And on this tree, a crow and a crane begin to fight with each other. Here is Kausika sitting, Lord, I am not going to give up until I find your bliss. And 2 minutes into that, the crow and the crane begin to fight right on top of his tree. He is so angry. He's so angry. Now I get angry as well, so do you, and usually nothing happens. People ignore me and I'm okay. Perhaps makes me angrier, but still, nobody cares. Now, when somebody like Kausika gets angrier, it's not that way. See, he's a refined soul. The universe responds to his feelings. So when he is angry, this anger of his heart, this overwhelming, irresistible feeling comes through him. He looks up and says, who dares disturb my meditation? And the distilled essence of his anger comes out as a flame through his spiritual eye. It shoots out and burns the crow and the crane. And in a moment, the ashes begin to rain down on him. 2 minutes into his meditation, where he was determined to find God, he has instead killed 2 birds without even a stone. Now, he's mortified. What did I do? Has all my sadhana, all my tapasya been for a naught? I've done all of this, and yet I have become a common murderer. 2 innocent birds I have killed. What is my duty? What did I do wrong? He gives up in frustration. It's evening time, and so he goes into the village. The first house he finds, he stands there and calls out, Bhavati Bhikshan Dehi, please, lady of the house, give me something to eat. And it was the duty of householders back in those days that when a sannyasi came, you gave them some simple food. These days, at least in the smaller cities, when such people come, we give them food that is spoiled. At least in the days before the refrigerator, we used to do that. It's, oh, somebody is begging for food out there, this food is spoiled, smell it, and if it's spoiled, give it to them. But back in those days, it didn't used to work like that. So the lady wants to feed him well. She doesn't want to hurry the thing. So she calls out and says, Revered sir, please wait. I'm going to come and give you the food. And then he waits. Kausika waits. He waits for 5 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, 45 minutes. He's already not very happy because he's killed 2 birds and yet he doesn't feel divine joy. So he's got bad things going on in his life. And he's now sitting hungry in front of this house. He cannot walk away either because the lady said she'll serve him food. Eventually, the lady comes out after maybe an hour and a half. She says, I'm sorry to have kept you waiting for so long. Please forgive me. I was serving my family. My in-laws are not very well, so I had to serve them. I had to serve my children and then my husband. So it took this long. You came at what was basically a bad time for me. And here is some food. Kausika by now is so angry. He's shaking with anger. And he says, Lady, you made me wait for such a long time. Do you not know who I am? Do you not know my powers? The entire village has heard of me, and just by thinking about it, sankalpa, just with sankalpa, I can burn down your house. And the lady looks at him and says, I'm neither a crow nor a crane that you can burn me down. Your anger has no effect on me. Kausika is stunned, stupefied. How does she know? And then she continues on in a voice that's sincere and humble. She says, do you not know, sir, that anger is the single greatest enemy that dwells in the heart of man? Your tapasya has provided you with a lot of powers. You think that those are powers that you have acquired by your actions. No, it isn't. You don't know the secret of karma. But it's because it's not given you the divine bliss that you seek. The powers that you have are not yours. It's merely God working through you. Until you sense the divine presence behind your every action, you will never feel God's joy. She says this sincerely and with great humility, but it has the irresistible ring of truth behind it. See, truth, when we hear it, has its own power, which is completely irresistible. That power is called agraha. It is something that forces us to do that. And that's why when Mahatma Gandhi started his movement, he called it satyagraha, the compelling power of truth. So he feels, Kausika at this point, satyagraha, the compelling power of truth in this lady's words. And in a moment, the anger that he has felt all along, he didn't even know, completely becomes still. It's replaced by a peace that he has never felt before. He folds his hands and says, Oh, great lady, I mistook you for a common householder. You're obviously a woman of great self-realization. Will you please instruct me further in the secrets of karma so that I too can be self-realized? And she says, No, sir, I don't have the ability to do that. I'm just a simple householder woman, and all I know is to take care of my family. The knowledge that you seek is present in the great city of Mithila. Mithila was the capital city of this kingdom. It says, go into the capital city of Mithila, and in there, seek Dharma Viata. Anybody will tell you who Dharma Viata is, and he will be able to dispel your doubts. So Kausika goes back and walks to the city of Mithila. After all, for somebody with his powers, this is not a big deal. Then he comes to this great city with its wide boulevards and roads, prosperous houses, people dressed in silks and finery, and he asks them, Sir, will you please direct me to Dharma Viata, the great saint? And they say, okay, go, take a left, take a right. You know, if you've gone up to here, you've come too far. And they start giving him directions. And he comes over. He comes to a very distasteful place. He's expecting to come to a palace or an ashram, but instead he comes to a very distasteful place. It's a slaughterhouse. It's a row of shops where people are slaughtering animals and butchering the meat. Where did I end up? What a horrible place this is. But then he has the memory of what this lady told him. For the first time, she made him experience peace and bliss that he hadn't found in years of meditation. So he says, I'm not going to give up. If slaughterhouse is where I am to be redeemed, then so be it. So he walks and he comes to the shop of Dharma Viata, the divine butcher. Viata, who is in the midst of, cutting some piece of meat, he just comes out and he says, Sir, did the lady send you? The lady from the village send you? By now he's used to this. Okay, whatever. I guess everybody knows this, and I don't know. He says, yes, sir, she did send me. And he says, oh, you're in the burning sun. Please sit in my shop. The Brahmin, Kausika, who's meditated and studied Vedas for years, distastefully, he walks into this slaughterhouse and sits on a bench. He has to clean things with his dhoti just to make sure he's not sitting on some filth, and he sits there. Because what to do? If this is God's will, that this is how he gets redeemed, then this is how he gets redeemed. Oh, he sits there, and Dharma Viata keeps going about his business. He's a well-built man, muscular. And Kausika begins to notice something. He works constantly. There's no break in what he does. There is a sense of peace in his face that is ethereal, that's inexplicable. And he always, when he weighs the meat, he gives a little more than what the customer paid for. And with every customer, he says, how are you? How is your family? He always has something good to say about them. In all the shops all around, there is conundrum. There is a lot of fights that are going on, haggling that is going on, and things like that. Whereas in Dharma Viata's shop, it's all peaceful. He begins to see something. Beyond this distasteful action that the butcher is committing every minute, he begins to sense the presence of God. Improbably, among all places, it almost begins. He says, the last time I went to one of the great shrines of Lord Shiva, this is how it felt. I had the same feeling. Something is going on. His mind begins to expand to a higher reality. And it goes on this way for a few more hours. By now it's about 1 or 1:30. And Viata finally finishes. He closes his shop, wipes his face with his dhoti, which is already dirty. And he says, sir, sorry to make you wait. By now, Kausika is used to such things. Please come with me, I will feed you. So they walk over to his house. It's a very small house. And Viata says, I still have a few more things to complete, sir, so please wait here. And those days, houses had an open portico up front. So he sits there. And then Kausika looks at what Viata is doing. He goes into his house. It turns out that both his parents are unable to walk. They have lost the use of their legs. So he lifts them up one by one and gives them a bath, cleans them like you would a child. And then he has meager stores of grains and food. He cooks them, very simple meal, and he feeds his parents with his own hands and washes them and then makes sure that they are resting. By now, outside, a few people have gathered, a few hungry, destitute people who have no other place to eat. and his food stores are dwindling. It's becoming less. He gives whatever is remaining to those beggars outside. And then he comes to Kausika and washes his feet, says, sorry for the delay, and let me give you food. He gives him food, patiently sits down, watches him eat. And only after Kausika is done, by now there is almost no food remaining, maybe half a roti, a couple of spoons of dal, he eats that. And that is it. And then Kausika looks at him. See, such is his judgment. He's come here to seek self-realization, to seek wisdom. But such is the inborn judgment of people like this, that instead of listening to what Vyata has to say, Kausika says, sir, the work that you do is horrible. You shouldn't be doing it. It's a grave sin. You will rot in hell for the rest of your afterlife. And Vyata looks at him and says, no, it isn't. The fact that I'm a butcher in this lifetime is because of my karma in the past. No work is high or low. Everything is the same. It would be a grave sin if I aspired for something that I was not meant to do. Then, punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam. I come back, punarapi janani, jathare shayanam, iha samsare bahudustare. I come back into this cycle of birth and rebirths, and there is no end to it. I have to do what is mine. So sit down, revered sir, I will tell you. Every day, ever since I became old enough to work, I have been doing my duty at the slaughterhouse. It doesn't bring me too much money, but I do it to the best of my ability. The customers that come, they are my gods. And he says, why? Why are they gods? They're just, regular people. He says, no. What they do is they give me the money which helps me put food in my parents' mouth. If God didn't work through them, we would all starve. So they are my gods. So what other duty do I have other than to give them the best possible meat that I can give them? This is new for Kausika. Really, that's how it works? He says, yeah, that's how it works. Then he says, whatever money I have, if there is more remaining, then I buy more food and feed it to the poor people. I never say a lie, not even casually or for a joke. I never criticize other people. I don't judge other people. And the more I do this, the more I feel God's presence. Then he says another important thing. He says, the work that I do is not as interesting as what you do. You study Vedas, Upanishads, scriptures all the time. You do all of these pranayamas. Mine is pretty boring. The only choice I have to make is which animal do I slaughter next. And I've been doing it for years. But what I've learned, if I do it with the greatest of enthusiasm, if I do it in order to serve other people, then I derive a pleasure that I suspect, sir, that you don't get from all of your meditations. Vyata is now listening to all of this. The vibrational presence, Kausika is listening to all of this. The vibrational presence of Vyata here, the way he's saying what he has seen all morning, what happened yesterday night with the householder lady, it's all transformed him. And suddenly, in a moment of epiphany, a moment of self-realization, it occurs to him. This is what I've been doing wrong. My duty was to go back home and take care of my parents, not to come to the forest and study Upanishads and Vedas, and those are all useless. Look what happened. It just made me angrier. So he looks at Vyata and says, thank you, sir. With your own life, with the power of your actions, you have transformed my mind. It is now very clear to me what I have to do. And he says goodbye to Vyata and goes back, not to his people tree, but back to his village. And there he finds his mother and father, who by now are very feeble. They can barely see. Then his mother embraces him and says, my son, I knew in my heart that you would always come back. She says, we're so happy that you're back. And he says, please forgive me. I did not know. I was misguided all my life. Now I know what my duty is. And then wholeheartedly, sincerely, with God's presence, he begins to serve his parents and begins a family of his own. And very soon, that little thing that was missing, that piece of divine bliss, comes to him. He too attains moksha, liberation. In saying so, Markandeya tells Yudhisthira that my son is the secret of karma. Beautiful story, isn't it? So wonderful.